MEPI is helping us in many ways, but I'd like to highlight how MEPI has helped us increase the capacity for training. Zambia is a country that attained independence in 1964. 2 years later, in 1966, the new medical school began. And population of Zambia has increased now from 4 million to 13 million. One of the failures of government has been the failure to increase the number of training capacity for medical students. And for 45 years, even though it was initially in the strategic health plan to increase the number of spaces and the number of, to increase the training capacity for, to training medical graduates, there was no government drive to take up that initiative. I personally, as Dean of School of Medicine, over time, had an opportunity to speak to 3 previous ministers of health. And I discussed with them on, whether it was possible for government to start a new medical school in Ndola. And I tried to convince them and to make a point. But none of those ministers, including some of them that were, sort of doctors, could take up that initiative. In the last government, just as MEPI came in, the Minister of Health, the new Minister of Health was an engineer. He was very energetic, young, and over a conference on AIDS in Namibia, I had an opportunity to speak to him over a cup of tea. And I told him of, the health strategic plan and how we should have had a new medical school many years earlier. And that for 45 years, government had not had a plan to start a new medical school. He said, "Is that so?" And to my surprise, 2 weeks later, when I was back in Lusaka, he called me personally and he said, "I want you to come, and that story you were telling me on, in Namibia about the new medical school, I want you to explain, to my colleagues in the Ministry of Health." So I went over to the ministry and I talked to them of the issue of my initial plan was to convert the Tropical Disease Research Center at Ndola Central Hospital, which is a second major town in the Copper Belt and has a huge hospital, 7 stories high, to convert that into a medical school. He liked the idea and he said, "We will start a medical school." So he went and spoke to the president, and we didn't know, but he announced it in Parliament and say the government is going to start a new medical school. We just read through the newspapers that a new medical school was going to begin. And I had assured him at that conference that we had trained enough clinicians, but that we are now, through MEPI, going to start a basic science course, and that would train teachers for the new medical school. Once they announced in Parliament, a technical working group was set up, and I was part of that technical working group, which was Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and WHO. The World Health Organization then sent a consultant to Lusaka, and the minister asked me to go along with him. We inspected Ndola Central Hospital. We went through the 89 offices which are on the top 2 floors, which belong to TDRC. And he took photographs and very in detail studied, the anatomy of the building, etc. And then there's a new College of Biomedical Sciences, which is within the hospital grounds. And we looked at the lecture theatres. There was a state-of-the-art new lecture built by the Irish government. And this was within the same grounds. Then we walked through the outpatients where he saw the queues of patients and the rich learning material. And he remarked at that time that back at home in Nigeria, this would have been a medical school 20 years ago. So he wrote a very nice report which went to the minister, and we formed a technical working group which met on a almost weekly basis to work out. And we invited the Vice Chancellor of the Copperbelt University to join us together with officials from Ministry of Health and Education. As a joint effort, they work together to form the new medical school. The Ministry of Health and Education, for the first time, worked together, because everything was compartmentalized. One ministry would say, look, this is not under us. Higher education is under, it's not under health, it's under education, and vice versa. But they worked together for the first time. The Ministry of Health provided funding to Ministry of Education. It went through the Ministry of Education to give to the Copperbelt University. They also gave up some infrastructure to the education sector. And together with MEPI, that school has now taken off. We are supporting, at the same time, there are 2 other new medical schools that began at the same time. So MEPI is supporting all the 3 schools. We're supporting them in the intranet, which the Moodle platform, and e-granary, which with the help of University of Alabama and Vanderbilt, who are our partners. And we are helping them with teaching materials, computers, overhead, on-screen projection, etc., to try and improve the facilities of all the 4 schools. Now, the main achievement of that was that government has indirectly been forced to double the funding to the training of health professionals. Because in the past they were supporting 1 university for 1 medical school. Now they'll be supporting 2. So there's been a 100% increase. When you look at the number of students that are admitted, our school itself has now increased to up to 100. But then the new medical schools, the first intake was 72, and smaller amounts for the 2 private schools. But the overall, we've doubled, in 1 year, we've doubled the number of health professional training. But at the same time, in order to keep quality, we haven't just increased in 1 school. We could have made a class of 200. But what we've done is we've kept our numbers low, but we've given that responsibility to a different university. And they have their mandate to train these students. At the same time, we've, with the help of University of Alabama and our partners, we've now set up, improved our local area, purchase materials for their own teaching purposes, for skills purposes. So those are some of the major achievements. There are many other areas in the library, in the delivery of our lectures, etc., which we hope to improve on with the help of MEPI. Well, it just means that a little bit of help with this funding will go a long way. I mean, just the fact that we were able to achieve so many things that we've achieved in this little time, because even when we started the project, we started a few months late. Funding arrived a bit late. But in spite of that, we have achieved so much. And, there's so much more that we're going to be able to do, because we're still in, we've just completed year 2, and there's year 3, 4, and 5 coming up. And I think we'll grow from strength to strength in that regard.